All right. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us for Lightning Talks Session A. We are delighted to have you with us this afternoon, and we're going to jump right in. We have five amazing presenters here who will be sharing their research and current data science work. And we are going to begin with Dr. Khalilah Ali, Assistant Professor, Department of Education at Spelman College, who will be presenting Black to the Future. Black pre-service teachers mapping the curricular intersections of technology design, project-based learning, and street art as Afrofuturist educative texts. Dr. Ali, thank you so much, and take it away.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to present this work, and it was inspired by the events of February 2nd, 2019, on the eve of Atlanta's Super Bowl that we played in our brand new erected Mercedes-Benz Stadium, which is not too far from the AUC, about a mile or so and a half or so from a dilapidated building on Lee Street. In the dead of night, this building was demolished. And there's an argument why this building was demolished, because there's an image of Colin Kaepernick, much like the one that you see here. This is the starting point of our inquiry. Next slide. So the study puts forth a few pertinent questions from the starting point that I shared about this mural on this dilapidated building that had been demolished right before the Super Bowl. So the goal is to investigate the meanings of urban public space and the art that inhabits urban public space, the way that public space functions as a didactic or self-learning platform, and as a way of spreading social justice awareness and those particularly social justice movements that are important to Black liberation through art. So there are a few important questions that I've listed on this slide, and I'll just focus on the two that sort of make sense for what we're doing today. How do street artists view their contribution to awareness and discussions around social justice and issues of equity? What are the potential intersections or points of divergence between street art in context and manufactured digital spaces? So I'm on the second slide where it's guiding questions in regard to placemaking for community members exposed to these mediums. Third slide, purpose and significance. I've argued that the intervention of art in urban public space offers effective ways of developing critical Black didactic art that is intended to teach folks something, particularly around social justice, which is understood for us to be an extension of pedagogy as teachers, as educators, and critical practice that the artists as cultural workers engage in. I'm arguing that creatives, cultural workers, are artists, activists, and educators. So I'm surmising this based on previous evidence about public space, a little bit about art as propaganda or agitation propaganda, but specifically I'm talking about Black art in Atlanta, Black street art, and murals. So there are a few examples of murals that the artists would argue are educative texts, teach us something about the communities that we live in. So the image of Dorothy Bolden on Lee Street, again, in the opposite direction away from the Kaepernick mural. Dorothy Bolden from Vine City, she was a domestic organizer, organized domestic organizers. So the scope of this project, purpose and significance, next slide. As a model for STEAM practices and curricula development, the participants will develop a project-based unit plan for our K through 12 partners. So there are lots of different participants. It's the artists, but it's also our partner schools. So we have a couple elementary schools who are STEAM or STEM schools that we work with, and we're trying to develop materials for them, but we want our materials to be important to the lived experiences of the students. So, but we also want to collect data in a way that we won't just use it for lesson plans, but also to make a little meaning of public discourse and the role street art and street artists play in public discourse. Next slide. So this is the mural I was talking about that was demolished. So along with my student researchers, we're going to engage in this mixed methods approach to collecting data. the data collection will happen concurrently and sequentially, so at the same times or together, but I'm going to refer to them as stages. So stage 1 are the interviews. This is where we interview the artist. The next stage is we start to draft a survey. This is the quantitative piece where we're going to survey individuals around, nearby, who are watching and observing the murals. Stage 3 is preparation of materials for our partner schools to create those lesson plans. So we're going to engage in some mural cataloging. We're going to create an interactive website. We're going to prototype some AR technology where you'll be able to scan the murals with a QR code and interact with the mural in different ways. We're also going to create a repository of murals. Just because they're so ephemeral, they tend to go, they can disappear. So the next slide, and sorry, that is my time, but I just wanted to show this last slide. So we're going to map the slides. We're going to create some augmented reality where folks can interact with the slides, and also a digital archive where we can sort of house the murals that we collect. And there's a lot of benefit beyond just the lesson plan for using this data. So thank you all. I appreciate your time, and I am done.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Ali. Again, if you guys have questions for Dr. Ali, please place them in the chat or the Q&A feature. Next up, we have Dr. Viveka Brown, Associate Professor, Department of Mathematics at Spelman College, and she will be presenting, Is It Really a Different World?
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Viveka Brown, and I'm talking about the development of my course, A Different World Revisited at Spelman College. QC, so an interdisciplinary big questions colloquia at Spelman College that incoming students have to take one semester of. The evolution of this course actually started in 2008 when I was a graduate student at Columbia University, and I was sitting with a friend and we were talking about how impactful the television show A Different World, which was a show about college life on an HBCU campus, how impactful it was. Being a first generation college student, I knew I had to go to college because I saw people who looked like me on that television show. So in 2012, I'm from Detroit, and I went back to Detroit and I worked with a nonprofit, and we actually created a workshop for high school students on college readiness. So I said, what better way to introduce college life than to show them an episode of A Different World? So we watched an episode of A Different World. We had discussions. We broke out and talked about college life, and it was amazing. Fall of 2012, I actually came to Spelman, so we sort of put that on a back burner. But then in the fall of 2018, I was able to start the course A Different World Revisited. Next slide. So just some number facts. So I've taught the course for 8 semesters now. I've had a total of 159 students in my class, and every semester about a third of the students of the class have never seen the show. So it's amazing to see their first perspective of the episodes. The 1987 to 1993 was the time span that A Different World was on the air. So on the right, you see here, during that time span, the HBCU enrollment actually increased. And so A Different World unintentionally brought HBCUs to mainstream, and we see it here with the numbers increasing during that time span. Next slide. So A Different World, one of the reasons why I enjoyed the show is because it talked about serious topics. It was a situational comedy, but it talked about different topics, serious topics. And so you see here on the left was a list of the episodes that we watched, and it's what is not an exhaustive list. But here, for instance, AIDS, A Different World was the first sitcom to talk and really have a serious conversation about AIDS and racism, HBCUs versus PWIs, colorism, domestic violence, date rape. So not only do we watch the episodes, we bring in data around the time frame A Different World was on, compare and contrast it to the data of what's going on in today's society, and really have some enriching conversations. We look at different themes and perspectives and just different ideas and events that went on around that time frame. So on the right, what you see is students have to complete their final project is actually to create an episode that was more pre-COVID. Post-COVID, they create a PowerPoint explaining what would they do in their episode. But as you can see here, these are the topics that are important to students today. So social justice, Black Lives Matter, mental health, human trafficking, balancing school and personal life, sexual assault, and negative effects of social media, which of course wasn't an issue during the time frame of A Different World. So they have these discussions, we look at this data, and they present a final project based upon these topics. Next slide. So here you see on the right hand side, I wanted to show this. One of the projects and assignments that I give students is to interview someone who is at least 15 years older than you on the television show, and then report out some of the things that you discussed in your interview. So one of my students, she wanted to be really creative, and the person she interviewed, their favorite character was Dwayne Wayne, and so she actually drew a picture of him, and then she wrote out her responses inside. And so this was just a creative way for her to disseminate her evidence. So future goals and research, there's tons of data because they do various projects. So further analysis, I have an IRB for this course. So I have summaries, data, interviews, papers, scripts. Some of them actually create their own scripts of episodes. So I want to further analyze that information, examine themes important to today's generation, continue to disseminate through presentations and papers. And one of the things that we talked about in the class is actually with some of the current topics, especially the serious issues that we look at, to perhaps even write a policy brief to submit to government. So those are some of the things that I look forward to continuing in the future. Next slide. That's my reference and contact information. And I believe my time is ending. Thank you.
Awesome job, Dr. Brown. Thank you so much. That was an amazing presentation. Who knew the connections between a sitcom we grew up watching and data science? So thank you so very much. If you have questions for Dr. Brown, please put those in the chat. Next up, we have Dr. Barbara Coombs, who is Associate Professor of Sociology and Criminal Justice at Clark Atlanta University, and she will be presenting on using data visualization to make invisible racism visible. Dr. Coombs, take it away.
Thank you so much. So, the prevailing theoretical framework idea about racism is that it's colorblind. And of course, we know that racism can not only be seen, but it can be felt. So, my objectives in this presentation, one, I want to demonstrate how data visualization can deepen student learning. I want to inform you about a partnership, the RAND AUC Social Policy Hackathon, and I want to call for more collaborative interdisciplinary work on racial disparities. Next slide, please. So, this idea about making the invisible visible, this slide shows a short 3-page article. Christopher Berry did it. It's called Searching Racism After George Floyd. And so you see the blip, this red area there. The red line running up and down is racism searches before the George Floyd incident and then after it. And that upward trend we see existed before, it continues to exist. But it's one of those powerful visualizations that made the invisible visible. Next slide. So we formed a partnership. Several scholars, 2 scholars from Morehouse, Dwan Davenport and Sinead Young, and I were in the faculty leaders program at Party Ran Graduate School. And we decided, Dr. Young began efforts for a hackathon. And so we worked on that. We had our kickoff presentation. Next slide. And in that kickoff presentation, one of the exercises that we took students through was to understand about the Titanic and the fact that 62% of people perished, at least in this Kaggle project that we took them through. Next slide. Kaggle the data set has about 981 out of 1,300 passengers. But we also wanted them to understand and have a deeper picture about the relationship between race, class, gender, those variables. And while 62% of people perished, when you look at the first class passengers, 63% of them survived. Next slide. And so in our hackathon, the social policy hackathon, we asked our students, we charged them to tell interesting, useful, insightful, data-driven stories about the trajectory and impact of the COVID pandemic. And they looked at, there were eight RAND researchers, 24 AUC students, 16 Party RAND graduate students, 5 judges, and we like to say 1 extraordinary experience. We charge students to try to think about presenting their data in ways that really would grip people. And so whether that was song or music, or certainly using graphs and charts. We say that the point of the exercise, or Marx says that the philosophers have studied the social world, but the point is to change it. And we wanted to equip our students with tools to change the world. Next slide. And so Dr. Young said that all of us were winners. We did have 2 winning teams that emerged, but all of us are winners when we're working together on solutions. So we worked on this for 3 weeks. We did the work, the learning community, for months beforehand, but in October and November with the students. And just the conclusions, there is a link that we can't go to right now, but it's available. You can search it, watching the Hacking Equity video recap on RAND.org or YouTube. I have demonstrated the potential to deepen engagement by using data visualization, by using data to enrich students' learning and to build a better social world. And I hope that you will do the same. Thank you. 13 seconds remaining.
Awesome job. Thank you so much, Dr. Coombs. Enjoyed that very much. Who knew all those things were possible with data visualization as it relates to making the invisible racism visible. So thank you so much for sharing your work. If you have any questions, again, please drop those in the chat. Our next presenter is Dr. Monique Earl-Lewis, who is the Associate Professor as well as Director at Morehouse College, and she is going to be presenting on engaging coding, creativity, and data science in service learning. The floor is yours, Dr. Earl-Lewis.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you all for sharing your incredible work, and for those who are joining us. So what I want to share with you today is a known problem. We know that despite the abundant opportunities, not everyone is included in this opportunity. Only 23% of tech employees are women, compared to 37% in 1995. Only 19% of students who receive degrees in computing are women of color. We know that more people of color switch their roles to another major, even when entering into STEM programs. And we also know that people of color who actually receive STEM degrees are less likely to use their STEM degrees in the future. So what I want to share with you today is the way in which, as an organizational psychologist, I am working to solve problems that we know at both an individual, group, and system level, using Black identity development, the digital humanities, app technology, and service learning to reconstruct student perceptions and beliefs about their place in this digital world. We are engaging coding, creativity, data science, and service learning at Morehouse College. This course is in partnership with our Bonner Office of Community Service, where we spend 2 semesters having students explore themselves as agents of social justice, understanding organizations as social justice action, having them to develop skills in coding and creativity, even gaining professional micro-credentials as first-year students, and incorporating the use of data science through data visualization and introducing them to data carpentry. Next slide, please. As a part of the HBCU C-Square Coding and Creativity Initiative, we launched in 2019 to bring the opportunity as a pathway to all students, not just students who are in our STEM majors. This initiative, anchored in Africana Studies, allows us to train faculty who are interested in engaging iOS technology as a part of their course redesign and redevelopment. They are even taught how to utilize the iOS tools to prototype apps and be introduced to coding and creativity. Next slide, please. As you can see, engaging Bloom's taxonomy and moving our students through a very intentional process, well, we begin first by just having students understand the capabilities in their hands. As a result of the pandemic, our students were able to engage this technology in the cloud. They were able to prototype apps, complete community engagement process by doing community asset mapping, creating story maps, being introduced to Swift coding, participating in professional learning opportunities as a part of this initiative, where they could see that there are opportunities abroad within the technology field for artists, for musicians, in addition to the opportunities for those who are interested in the STEM majors and in coding. You do not need to have a degree only in a STEM area now to participate as an active member, to have your voices heard. They created data visualization using content to help contribute to voter registration, voter suppression, voter election by sharing known information and statistics across their communities. Next slide, please. So part of what we did in engaging the use of app technology was incorporating our FYE, freshman year experience student learning objectives. We engaged in formative assessment. The course is actually a scaffolded flipped classroom, so students scaffold their skills as they move through the semester. We engage challenge-based learning and incorporate the use of these 21st century skills. We use Africana Studies research methodologies, a mixed methods, ethnography, and action research approach that engages, again, community asset mapping, social problems research, and the digital humanities. Last slide. I invite you to reach out to learn more about how these resources can be used on your campuses. I thank you so much for your time, and I think my time is up.
All right, Dr. Earl-Lewis, thank you so much for your presentation. Very interesting work, and I love your slides. Very colorful indeed, so they capture the audience's attention. If you have questions for Dr. Earl-Lewis, you may drop those in the chat at this time. She will be monitoring and responding. And lastly, our final speaker will be Dr. Tuwaner Lamar, Assistant Professor of Mathematics at Morehouse College, and she will be presenting on the report of student performance for year 3 of College Algebra 1 with online lab using ALEKS. So, Dr. Lamar, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Next slide, please. Morehouse designed to use an online platform to improve math placement. Prior to fall 2017, we were just using the SAT and the ACT math scores in order to place students, and that wasn't a good method of placement. In fall 2017, after investigating several online platforms for placement, we went with ALEKS, PPL. And the reason why we went with that one is because it's not just a one and done where they take the placement test and then they show up for classes in the fall, but it also has preparation learning modules. And so once the students commit to come to Morehouse in the spring, they pay their commitment fee, then they can begin the process refreshing, reviewing, relearning, and learning new math skills before they even get on campus. So unexpectedly, this eliminated remedial math at Morehouse. However, some students still need additional prep time after arriving on campus in the fall session. In fall 2019, we also restructured our path to calculus. We took 2 3-credit hour courses, college algebra and pre-calculus, and we broke those into 3 2-credit hour courses, college algebra 1, college algebra 2, and trigonometry. We further broke college algebra 1 down into 3 versions, college algebra 1 with college algebra 1 lab, where students need a lot of help, or some of those students not have even taken an algebra class when they were in high school. So it might be their first time seeing algebra. And then we have college algebra 1 with online lab, where students need some help. They're not ready to do a college algebra class by themselves yet. And then the college algebra 1, those students have strong foundational skills and they're ready to take their college algebra class by themselves. Next slide, please. So in the Algebra 1 with online lab, students are required to attend the lab 2 hours a week, and they're required to master or learn a minimum number of topics each week. Then they're required to take a post-test before they can test out of the lab. And this has to be at or above the prep for college algebra level. It can be at the prep for pre-calculus level. And once they pass the post-test, they do not have to attend the lab anymore. They can access this anytime during the semester. And we actually encourage them to finish that midterm. Next slide, please. So the data that I will present, we used 2 statistical methods to analyze data, box plots to compare the pre and post test, and simple linear regression to model the correlation between the ALEKS post test and the grade earned in the course. 127 students enrolled in 5 sections of College Algebra 1 with online lab in fall 2019, and their ALEKS placement score on the pretest was between 30 and 45. Of all of those 127, 60.6% passed their course, and 115 students took a placement test. However, only 93 took both a pre and post test. Next slide, please. Of those 93 students, their average pretest score was 32.1, and their average post-test score was 54.6. And their average median score was 32, and the average post-test median score was 56. And you have a graphic of the improvement in the pre and post. Next test, please. Next slide, please. And we did a regression analysis between the ALEKS post-test grade, the score, and the grade earned in the course on those 93 students. And those 93 students had a pass rate of 5.3%. And the correlation analysis showed that there was a very strong positive correlation between that online lab post-test and the grade earned in the course. And this was also corroborated in a 95% confidence interval. Next slide, please. Significant increase in ALEKS pre and post tests were observed. A positive correlation was established between the course grade earned in the College Algebra 1 with online lab and the ALEKS post test score for the online lab. Future work will be conducted to conduct longitudinal studies to investigate student performance in follow-on math courses and investigate and compare pass rates data and investigate and compare the 4-year graduation data impact. Next slide, please. These are my acknowledgements and my references. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Lamar. That concludes all of our presentations for Lightning Talk Session A. We have about 2 minutes remaining, so if there is anyone who has a question that has not been answered, if you'll place it in the chat, I can present those to our presenters and have them answer. It looks like we do have a question for Dr. Earl-Lewis. How are student coders being utilized for product development?
Okay, so what is happening now is that students are being given the opportunity to complete their Swift coding, and earn their Swift coding badges to be certified. We will then support them through this initiative to become ex-coders so they can get the professional credentialing. the way that the students are currently engaged is that they are able to partner with our lead school, Tennessee State University, and participate in the larger coding events. So they're working with Mr. Mark Dupont, who is the lead coder for this initiative housed with Tennessee State, and he provides different learning opportunities. Right now, we have one student who has completed the process and is working to develop apps under the leadership of Mr. Opont. We hope to increase the number of faculty and students who are SWIFT certified and Xcode certified so that we can cultivate our own app development. So send them our way.
Awesome. One other question I have for Dr. Ali. How can folks learn more about Dr. Ali's mural project work?
We're currently working on developing a website with the Innovation Lab at Spelman. And when that happens, it'll be available. We'll put out an announcement. But in the meantime, you can certainly follow me on all the socials. So I'm Khalilah Ali, PhD, on everything. So I'm just going to drop that in the chat. So Facebook, Twitter, all of that.
Awesome. Well, thank you again to Dr. Coombs, Dr. Lamar, Dr. Brown, Dr. Ali, and Dr. Earl-Lewis. That is the end of this session. We thank you all to the guests who joined us this afternoon. And again, please feel free to reach out to our wonderful presenters via social media or their websites or their emails that have been shared in the chat. Thank you again, and we wish you a happy Friday. Enjoy the rest of your day.